The jungle breathes like a living god. Heavy air, thick with moisture and the scent of rot, curls around the shattered stones of an ancient world. Somewhere beneath the canopy where the sun dares not reach, a man lies among the ruins, motionless, scarred, and old as the war that once tore Olympus in two. His name is Kalios, though even that feels like a memory whispered by ghosts. When his eyes open, he sees the sky fractured through branches, streaked with thunder. He hears the slow pulse of his own blood, the hum of unseen creatures and the sighs of 1,000 forgotten prayers tangled in the vines. His armor, once radiant bronze, is now a dull relic crusted with rust and blood. His axes lie beside him, half buried in the earth, faintly glowing with the runes of a time when men spoke to gods without fear. He rises slowly, his muscles stiff, his breath uneven. Every movement feels like the dragging of a mountain. Beneath his boots, old marble breaks apart, and the sound echoes through the mist like a cry from another life. He touches the carvings of a fallen column, worn faces of gods erased by centuries of rain. Once these faces demanded worship. Now moss grows where offerings used to burn. Kalios remembers battles, oceans turned red, skies burning, the laughter of gods who watched from above while mortals bled for their amusement. He remembers standing before the temple of Aegeon, blades in hand while lightning danced across his skin. He remembers the face of his brother before he vanished in the storm. Then darkness, silence, and now, this jungle that seems to breathe his name. He walks. Slowly, through the ruins of temples swallowed by roots. Birds scatter when he passes, their cries sharp and fleeting. Insects buzz around his scars as though tasting his mortality. He feels the pull of the axes at his sides. Their runes flicker brighter with every step, whispering in a tongue he no longer understands. The jungle thickens. Strange pillars rise around him, carved with scenes of gods drowning in vines, their power consumed by nature itself. One pillar bears his likeness, Kalios, carved in stone, standing beside a god with thunder in his hands. He stares at it for a long time, unable to breathe. "I was never meant for worship," he murmurs, his voice rough as gravel. "Only for war." Thunder rumbles across the horizon, low and slow. He follows the sound through the ruins until the trees open into a clearing. There, beyond a wall of mist, stands something vast. An ancient statue of Zeus, half collapsed, its head resting against the ground. Lightning flashes behind it, splitting the sky into fire and shadow. Kalios stands before the fallen god. The air feels charged, alive with echoes of prayers that never reached their destination. For a moment he thinks he hears his brother's voice in the thunder. A whisper, a plea. His grip tightens on his axes. He raises his eyes to the hollow face of the statue. "You watched us burn," he says quietly. "You watched us fall. And now you rot beneath the vines, same as us." Rain begins to fall. It trickles down his face, over the scars on his chest, over the edges of his armor. The axes hum louder now, sensing the storm. Kalios closes his eyes and lets the rain strike him, cleansing the dust of centuries. He feels something stir inside him, a memory or perhaps a curse. He turns from the statue and walks deeper into the jungle. The light fades. The air thickens. Around him, the shapes of forgotten shrines emerge from the mist. Faces of gods with eyes gouged out, altars covered in roots. The earth trembles with distant thunder, and the trees sway as though bowing to something unseen. He finds a cracked stone bench beneath a canopy of massive ferns and sits, resting his axes across his knees. Steam rises from his armor in the humid air. Every scar on his body throbs with memory. The whisper of the runes grows faintly melodic as though singing him back to sleep. But Kalios does not sleep. He looks into the darkness beyond the trees, sensing movement. Shapes, small, fast, silent. Not beasts, not men. Something older. Eyes glint faintly in the shadows, watching. He does not move. In his mind, the voice of his brother returns. "We fought for them, Kalios. For gods who used us like stones in their game. What did it earn us? What did it make you?" Kalios grips his axes until his knuckles crack. "It made me what they feared," he whispers. Something rustles behind him, a soft sound like footsteps on wet leaves. He stands silent as stone, eyes fixed on the darkness. The whispering stops. For a heartbeat, everything in the jungle holds still. Then lightning flashes, and in that blinding white he sees them. Figures tall and thin, carved from mist and bone. Their faces hidden beneath masks of vine and ash. The ancient guardians. the remnants of a faith that refused to die. They move without sound, circling him. He raises his axes, the runes blazing now like molten gold. The air vibrates. Thunder rolls overhead. The jungle itself seems to breathe faster. The first guardian lunges, a blur of smoke and stone. Kaelios pivots, his blade cutting through air, then through spirit. The creature bursts apart, scattering like dust in sunlight. But more follow, dozens, hundreds, all born from the mist. Their movements are swift and dreamlike, their eyes burning with forgotten wrath. Kaelios fights like the memory of a god. Each swing of his axes tears through the shadows, sparks lighting the jungle. The sound of battle echoes like drums of thunder. His breath grows heavy, his body soaked in rain and sweat, but he does not stop. He cannot. When the last guardian falls, the jungle is silent again. Steam rises from the ground where their forms had dissolved. Kaelios drops to one knee, his axes sinking into the soil. The runes dim slowly, returning to their dull glow. He looks around. The pillars, the vines, the ancient faces. The jungle no longer feels hostile. It feels mournful, as though it too remembers what was lost. Kaelios tilts his head back, gazing through the canopy to the darkening sky. "You can bury gods," he says softly, "but not their echoes." The rain stops. The mist lifts. A faint golden light breaks through the clouds, painting his face in fire and shadow. For a moment, the warrior closes his eyes, letting the warmth touch him like a forgotten prayer. Then he rises, grips his axes, and begins to walk again, into the depths of the green labyrinth where even gods dare not tread. The jungle breathes. The thunder fades, and the man who should have died 1,000 years ago disappears into the mist, carrying the weight of Olympus on his shoulders. Night had fallen long before the moon rose. The jungle was no longer the domain of men or gods. It belonged to the breath between them. Silver mist drifted like the memory of prayer, and the leaves shone wet with the reflection of unseen stars. Out of that shifting light walked Lysara, the huntress of Alaris, the thief of divine flame. She moved without sound. Her bare feet pressed into the soil as if it knew her name. The golden spear she carried gleamed faintly, veins of fire running along its length. Every step she took sent whispers through the vines, the ancient tongues of the forest murmuring in awe and fear. Her armor, light and curved like the crescent moon, caught shards of silver light with every movement. Her hair, dark, tangled, and damp, clung to her face, but her eyes burned with the pale glow of something not wholly mortal. Lysara had walked for days without sleep. The wounds on her arm had closed, leaving faint blue veins that pulsed with celestial heat. She had stolen the fire of a god, a flame that could pierce immortality, and for that Olympus had turned its eyes upon her. Every sound in the night carried judgment. Every breath reminded her of the cost. She stopped beside a ruined pillar half devoured by vines. A carving showed a goddess of the hunt, bow raised to the heavens. Once Lysara had prayed to her. Now she only watched in silence. "You wanted devotion," she whispered to the stone, "and I gave you rebellion." Her voice was calm but heavy, like water over granite. From somewhere deep in the jungle came the cry of a beast, a sound so old it might have belonged to the first dawn. The trees shivered. The wind carried the scent of blood. Lysara tightened her grip on the spear and began to move again, deeper into the labyrinth of roots and shadows. The moon followed her, sliding across the treetops. Its light fell in broken patterns upon the forest floor, circles of silver where spirits were said to gather. She stepped through one and the air grew cold. A whisper brushed her ear. "Thief of flame. Return what was stolen." Lysara did not answer. She had heard the voices for nights unending, the fragments of divine wrath still echoing from the heavens. She knew what they wanted, but the flame that burned inside her chest had fused with her heart. To return it would be to die. She reached a clearing where the ground sloped toward an ancient pool. The water was black, smooth as glass, reflecting the moon with unnatural clarity. Lysara knelt beside it, setting her spear across her lap. The reflection that looked back at her was not entirely her own. Her eyes were brighter, almost white, and the faint shimmer of divine fire traced her skin like ink. She remembered the temple of Alaris, the night of her betrayal. The god's voice calling her by name, offering eternal service, demanding obedience. She remembered the moment she refused, when she struck down the altar and took the flame for herself. She remembered the roar that followed, the sky tearing open, the curse descending. Now even the stars avoided her. A faint ripple touched the pool. She froze. The water began to swirl, slow and deliberate as if stirred by unseen hands. Faces formed within it, pale, hollow, drifting up from the depths. Spirits of those who had died in her defiance. They spoke not in words but in sorrow. Lysara reached out. The water rose to meet her palm, cold as moonlight. A single tear slipped from her eye, vanishing into the reflection. "I remember you," she whispered. "I remember all of you." The spirits dissolved. The pool stilled. A single petal, white as bone, fell from the canopy and landed on the surface, sending ripples outward. Lysara stood, tightening the strap of her armor. The forest exhaled. Then came the growl, low, guttural, close. The darkness behind her shifted. She turned slowly, eyes narrowing. From between the trees it emerged. A creature wrought from shadow and bone, its body crawling with embers, its jaw lined with teeth like swords. A guardian bound to the god she betrayed. Lysara raised her spear, and for a heartbeat time held its breath. The jungle bent backward in the silence before fury. Then she moved. The spear spun in her hands, leaving streaks of golden light that tore through the mist. The creature lunged, claws raking the air, and met her mid-strike. Sparks burst across the clearing. Every blow was a clash of divinity and defiance, light against decay. The jungle shuddered with the impact. Trees split, vines burned, the air filled with fire and ash. She fought with grace that bordered on madness, every movement precise, every strike laced with anger buried too long. The guardian shrieked, wings of smoke unfurling, but she drove the spear through its chest. The light exploded outward, consuming the creature in a halo of gold. When the brilliance faded, only ash remained. Lysara fell to one knee, chest heaving, sweat and blood mingling on her skin. The jungle was silent again, the pool calm, the moon indifferent. She looked down at her hands, glowing faintly with the same fire she once stole. The flame pulsed once softly as if alive. She whispered to the night, "You sent your beasts. Send your gods next." Her voice did not echo. It sank into the darkness like a promise. Lysara stood and faced the horizon. Beyond the trees, beyond the veil of mist, a faint glow marked the ruins of another temple. The air shimmered with power. The same unseen current that stirred across the world whenever Kalios raised his axes. Neither of them knew the other existed, yet destiny had begun to weave their paths across the same jungle. She walked toward the light, her shadow stretching long behind her. The spear hummed softly, guiding her through the black. Above her the moon burned bright, cold and eternal, watching the huntress move through its silver kingdom. And as she vanished into the depths, the jungle whispered her name, not in warning, but in reverence. Lysara, the thief of fire, the goddess who ran from the gods. The storm had followed him since dawn. It crawled over the horizon like a wounded beast, its belly full of lightning, its voice a long growl that never ended. Kalios moved through the jungle with his head bowed, every step sinking into mud that steamed with the scent of rain and iron. The trees bent low under the weight of the sky, and the air itself seemed to tremble around him. He no longer wondered why the jungle lived. He wondered why he still did. Each breath was a burden he had carried from war to war, a debt the gods had forgotten to collect. The runes on his axes glowed dimly through the downpour, lines of gold tracing the pattern of his heartbeat. When thunder cracked above him, they flared like twin suns, then faded, hungry again. He came to a ridge where the forest opened into a scar of broken rock. Below, an ancient causeway wound between ruined columns half swallowed by vines. The air shimmered with heat despite the rain, and in the distance the sea roared beyond cliffs of black basalt. He had seen this place before, in dreams and fragments of dying gods whispering through the centuries. It was here the Titans were said to have fallen, their blood turning the soil red for 100 years. Kalios descended, boots striking the stone with hollow weight. Lightning flashed, painting the carvings on the columns, serpents, suns, and men kneeling before a faceless god. One symbol caught his eye, a circle divided by a single line carved so deep the stone bled water. He reached out to touch it, and the air grew cold. A voice rose from the wind, rough as rock dragged across steel. "You are late, child of war." Kalios froze. The sound came from nowhere, yet it filled the space around him. The ground pulsed once, and in that pulse he saw shapes, shadows moving beneath the surface, hands reaching from the cracks. He lifted his axes. "Show yourself, you left us to die," the voice hissed. You who fought for the gods, you who struck their enemies, then fled into the dark, you carry their fire still. The stone beneath him split open. A pale hand burst from the crack, followed by another. From the earth rose figures made of dust and memory. Warriors of the old world, the ones who had fallen beside him when Olympus turned its back. Their faces were masks of mud, their eyes empty. Kalios stepped back, heart hammering. "No," he said, but the word came out as a breath. The first of them lunged. He met it with the flat of his blade, and the impact sent a shudder through his arm. They fought with no sound, no pain, no end, each strike like thunder trapped in bone. Rain hissed on his skin. Sparks leapt from the runes. For a moment the storm and the dead became one, circling him in a ring of lightning and blood. He fought until his body blurred into movement, until his thoughts vanished beneath instinct. When at last the final shade dissolved into ash, Kalios fell to one knee, his breath ragged. Steam rose from the wet stone. Around him the jungle watched in silence. The runes on his axes flickered weakly. He stared at them, chest heaving. "You still bind me," he said. "You still feed." In answer, lightning split the sky and struck the circle on the pillar. The symbol burned white, alive. A deep vibration rolled through the ground and far away across mountains and sea. Something answered, a second echo, faint but clear, the cry of another soul bound by the same fire. Kalios felt it in his bones. Not a voice, not words, but presence, a spark of divine flame matching his own. His hands trembled. He looked toward the east, where the jungle grew dark again. Someone else was out there. Someone cursed as he was, the rain eased. Mist gathered around his shoulders, wrapping him like a shroud. He stood, muscles aching, eyes fixed on the distant lightning where the sea met the sky. For the first time since waking, he felt purpose move within him. Not hope, not redemption, but something colder, older. A pull written by gods long dead. He sheathed his axes across his back and began to walk toward the rising wind. Behind him, the circle on the stone still burned, whispering faintly in the voice of thunder. The rain had reached her long before the thunder did. Lysara stood at the edge of a flooded glade, water rising around her ankles, cold as the breath of the underworld. The jungle around her was a cathedral of shadows, roots twisting like serpents, leaves trembling under silver light. Every drop that touched her skin felt alive, whispering the memory of a storm far older than this one. She raised her hand, tracing the scars that wound like constellations across her forearm. Once they had been wounds. Now they were scripture, the mark of the gods she had defied, the mark of the fire she still carried within her. The jungle pulsed softly like a living creature breathing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Somewhere beyond the trees a sound echoed, metal against stone, faint but certain. She turned her head slightly. The wind shifted. She could feel him. The one whose flame mirrored her own, but she did not move toward it. Not yet. The curse had taught her patience. She stepped forward through the flooded earth until she reached a fallen statue lying half buried in moss. Its face was gone, devoured by centuries of rain. Only its crown remained, cracked and tilted, once the image of a goddess of war. Lysara knelt beside it, running her fingers through the moss, uncovering an ancient sigil carved deep into the stone, a circle divided by a single line, the same one that haunted her dreams. A tremor rippled through the ground. The air grew heavy, charged with memory. From the shadows of the glade came voices, thin and sharp as broken glass. "Daughter of Ash," they whispered. "You burned the altar. You broke the oath." Lysara closed her eyes. The voices grew louder, swirling around her like a storm of ghosts. Shapes formed in the mist, women in torn armor, faces carved from grief. Her sisters, her soldiers, her fallen. "I remember you," she murmured. Her voice trembled, not from fear but from the unbearable ache of recognition. "You chose silence. I chose fire." The ghosts circled closer, their eyes burned white, their mouths wide with accusation. "You left us to the gods," they cried. "You begged for power and abandoned the rest." Lysara rose slowly, her cloak sliding from her shoulders into the water. The light from the runes across her chest flickered faintly, pulsing like a dying heart. "No," she said softly. "I begged for freedom." Her sword glowed, lines of silver crawling across its edge. With one step forward, the rain seemed to freeze in the air. She swung. The world erupted in light. When the brilliance faded, the ghosts were gone. Only silence remained, deep, trembling, infinite. Lysara fell to her knees, breath tearing through her chest. Steam rose around her. In that silence came a sound, a single heartbeat that wasn't hers. A distant echo carried through the wind and the rain. She lifted her head. The pulse was faint, yet it matched her own rhythm perfectly. Another like her, bound by the same fire, cursed by the same gods. For a long time she stayed there, unmoving, listening, and as she listened, a slow, fierce resolve began to take shape within her. The path ahead was clear, carved not by destiny but by defiance. The gods had tried to chain her to eternity. Now she would walk through eternity until the chain shattered. Lightning flashed across the jungle canopy. The trees bent beneath the wind, bowing to something greater than storm. Lysara stood, gripping her sword tightly. She turned toward the west, toward the echo that still called to her across the miles of rain and ruin. She did not know his name, but she knew his fire. The jungle parted before her as she walked. The rain softened into mist, and for a heartbeat, before the darkness swallowed her again, the same circle, the divided mark of the gods, flared upon the horizon, glowing faintly like a memory refusing to die. The jungle slept uneasily that night. Its breath rose in thick waves of mist, curling around trees that had seen 1,000 wars. Above, the moon hung low and red, its light bleeding through clouds like a wound that would not close. Somewhere deep in that living labyrinth, 2 fires burned on opposite ends of the world, each unaware of the other, yet drawn closer by the same unseen hand. Kalios had found shelter beneath the bones of an ancient tree. Its roots knotted into a hollow large enough to swallow him whole. The rain had stopped, but the air was still wet with memory. He sat with his back to the wood, eyes half closed, listening to the pulse of the forest. Every sound was amplified, the crack of branches, the drip of rain, the slow turning of the earth. His body ached from battle, but it was not pain that kept him awake. It was the echo, the same heartbeat that had reached him through the storm. He had tried to dismiss it as illusion, a trick of exhaustion, but the fire in his blood told him otherwise. It was real. It was alive. He raised one of his axes, turning it slowly. The runes glowed faintly, forming a circle bisected by a single line, the mark that had appeared in the stone and now haunted his dreams. When he closed his eyes, he could almost see her, a shadow moving through rain, a light behind the veil. He whispered into the dark, "Who are you?" The wind shifted. The jungle answered not with words, but with the low murmur of water moving through roots. Somewhere far away, Lysara stirred. She lay beneath a canopy of ivy, surrounded by the glow of fireflies. Her sword rested beside her, its edge catching the faint light like the breath of a sleeping god. For the first time in many nights she had dreamed, and the dream had not been her own. She saw him. Not his face, not his voice, but the shape of him, carved from war, walking through lightning, eyes burning like the memory of a son long dead. She had awoken with her heart pounding and the name of a god on her tongue, though she could not remember which one. Now she sat in silence, tracing the circle symbol into the dirt beside her. "Why do you follow me?" she murmured. "Or is it I who follows you?" The fireflies dimmed, their light bending inward, drawn to the mark she had drawn. For a heartbeat it flared red, and then the jungle answered with a whisper that was not wind. "Because you are not two. You are halves of the same flame." Lysara froze. Her breath left her body in a slow, uneven sigh. She lifted her eyes toward the horizon where lightning flickered, faint but steady. It came from the west, the same direction she had felt the echo before. Kalios rose as the storm began to gather again. He could feel it pulling him, dragging his body and mind toward something that waited beyond reason. The vines trembled. The earth quaked softly underfoot. In every drop of rain he could sense the voice of the gods whispering his name. He stepped out of the hollow, lifting his axes to the sky. "If this is your doing," he said to the storm, "then I will face it. But I will not bow." Thunder answered him like applause. Lightning crawled across the heavens in white veins. For an instant the storm's light took shape, 2 figures back to back, their shadows overlapping. Then the image was gone. Miles away, Lysara felt it too. Her sword hummed, the air vibrating around her in perfect rhythm with the storm's pulse. She closed her eyes and let the sound fill her, let it twist through her bones until her breath matched its rhythm. "He comes," the jungle whispered, "and so do you." Her eyes opened, sharp as drawn steel. She lifted her blade and began to walk, following the storm. For days the two wandered closer, each step erasing the distance the gods had placed between them. Kalios crossed rivers that boiled from lightning, climbed cliffs split open by the earth's anger. Lysara walked through fields of silent statues, their faces frozen mid-prayer, their eyes hollowed by centuries of waiting. And each night, they dreamed the same dream, a temple of obsidian rising from the sea, columns like spears piercing the sky. At its heart, a single throne, and on that throne not a god, but a reflection. When Kalios approached the temple in his dream, the reflection stood. When Lysara entered, the reflection smiled. Neither spoke, yet both awoke with the same word burning in their chest: Aegeon. It was not a name they had ever heard before, yet it felt older than the language of men. A place, a god, a memory they could not tell, but the storm moved that way, and so did they. By the time the jungle began to thin and the first shapes of mountains appeared in the mist, the air had changed. The silence was heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The trees grew taller, darker, their trunks scarred by fire long extinguished. Kalios stopped at the edge of a river the color of mercury. Across it stood a gate of black stone, carved with runes that pulsed faintly in the dark. The circle mark appeared again at the center, glowing faintly as though recognizing him. He touched it, and on the other side of the world, Lysara did the same. The gate shuddered. A deep rumble rolled through the ground, traveling miles through root and rock, uniting both their worlds for a single heartbeat. The symbol flared white. The air cracked. The sound of thunder became something else, a low, resonant tone that filled the sky. And then, silence. Kalios stepped back. The river had vanished. The gate had disappeared. All that remained was a single trail of burning symbols leading east. He looked toward the horizon. So did Lysara. Neither knew the other's face, yet both whispered the same words into the storm. I am coming. The mountains bled light. It was not sunrise, not yet, but the sky trembled as though it remembered what dawn once felt like. Across the ridges, storms had thinned to whispers. The air hung heavy, metallic, tasting of salt and ash, and in that silence, two fires moved toward one another, one forged in wrath, the other in sorrow. Kalios stood at the edge of a cliff, staring down at the valley that stretched into forever. The land below shimmered with mist and ruins. Once this had been the heart of a kingdom, marble pillars, temples to gods who had long since turned to dust. Now only shadows remained, their outlines broken and hollow beneath the pale sky. He had followed the trail of burning runes for days, each one fading as he passed. His body bore new scars carved by storms and time, but his purpose had grown sharper. The voice that had once tormented him had gone silent, leaving behind a strange calm, the stillness before the final strike. He breathed deeply, and the scent of the sea reached him from beyond the mountains. The same sea that had once reflected Olympus, now gray and endless. Below him the valley stirred. Mist shifted, revealing a single path that wound through the ruins and led to a great archway, two colossal pillars of obsidian, etched with the mark of the circle divided by light. And beyond that arch, the temple from their dreams awaited. Aegeon Kalios descended slowly, each step echoing through the stone like a heartbeat. His axes gleamed faintly, runes pulsing with anticipation. He felt it again. The echo, stronger now, like two flames beating within one chest. Across the valley, through another passage of broken marble and shattered idols, Lysara walked. Her sword rested on her shoulder, its edge faintly glowing. The air around her shimmered with heat. She felt the same pull, the same whisper that had haunted her since the storm, a call not from the gods, but from something deeper, something human. When she reached the archway, the mist parted. Kalios stepped through from the opposite side. For a long moment, they simply stood there, staring across the distance between them. No words, no sound, only the slow rise of wind through ancient pillars. Lysara's eyes were hard, but behind them burned exhaustion, grief, and recognition. Kalios lowered his axes slightly. The runes on both their weapons flickered in unison. His voice was low, raw. You're the one. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. And you are the echo, she said softly. The gods bound us, didn't they? He nodded once, A curse that pretends to be purpose. The wind roared through the temple ruins, scattering ash. Lightning flashed in the distance, though no storm remained. They made us weapons, Lysara said, and then they left us to rust in eternity. Kalios's jaw tightened. Then let's break what they built. Silence fell again. For the first time, their fire did not burn in opposition. It began to merge. The symbols carved into their flesh glowed brighter, pulsing like the same heart beating in two bodies. Lysara stepped closer. The air between them wavered, alive with energy that was neither mortal nor divine. When two flames born of the same spark meet, she whispered, "The world must choose which one to remember." Kalios met her gaze. "Then let it remember both." He lifted one axe. She raised her sword. The moment their weapons crossed, the world itself seemed to inhale. The ground split. The pillars trembled. The sky darkened to crimson. From the cracks beneath the temple, voices rose. The screams of sleeping gods awakening, furious that their creations had defied them. Lightning rained down like arrows, striking the earth, but Kalios and Lysara stood unmoving. The light from their weapons now blinding, consuming the darkness around them. Every strike of thunder carried their heartbeat. Every gust of wind carried their names. Kalios drove one axe into the ground. The earth screamed. Lysara plunged her blade beside it. The two weapons met beneath the surface, their runes interlocking like halves of a forgotten language. A column of pure light erupted from the temple, soaring into the heavens. The storm froze. The sea stilled. In that light, Kalios saw 1,000 battles. His brothers, the fallen, the fire that had never gone out. He saw the faces of gods shattering into dust. He saw himself not as a warrior, but as a man finally freed of purpose. Lysara saw her sisters rising from ashes, their armor shining once more. She saw every prayer that had gone unanswered finally find its voice. And then she saw him, Kalios, standing in the same light, his eyes reflecting her own sorrow and strength. The world began to break. The temple cracked open, light spilling through its wounds. The circle symbol carved into its gates flared one last time, no longer divided. Kalios reached out. "This is the end," he said. Lysara took his hand. "No," she whispered. "It's the beginning the gods feared." The light consumed them both. The jungle miles away turned silent. The seas calmed. The sky bled gold and white. When the light faded, the temple of Aegeon was gone. In its place stood a field of glass, smooth and endless, reflecting a sky unbroken by storm. The air hummed with warmth, not divine, not mortal, something in between. And if one listened closely, in the wind that passed over that silent plain, there were whispers. Two voices, indistinguishable from one another, speaking in rhythm. "We are not gods. We are not ghosts. We are the fire that remembers."